Just hoping that someone can see the lights in my eyes reflected in this video. I don't know if they'll come out or not. I wasn't even planning on doing this, but I can see them when I look in the mirror, that they have two strange lights in my eyes, which the only reason I say they're strange is because they are not a round shape. They're a particular shape, and I first noticed them quite a while ago now, when I was first basically, you could say, where I became aware of being patrolled and continuously watched by almost every civilian on the street and every vehicle, planes, etc. And also not just watched, but basically watched in a way that made me feel like as though you're being stalked, but also stalked in a way where they show that they secretly don't like you. When I say secretly, in the sense that if all the traffic makes very loud aggressive noise, if the planes go right over the roof, I was just going to show the plane going over the roof because the sun is hardly up, and yet I'm going to turn the video around now. Oh, I don't think I can do that. I was going to turn it around because I need to show the TV, because this most 99.9% or more of what is on the internet is not human beings, or not real human beings actually giving you any information or making any videos. By that I mean that although they come in a human body and are certainly real for all intentional purposes, they're not humane. They merely pretend to be the finest examples of humanity. And those that are the real humans, or those that have any real humanity in them, will be largely suppressed and pushed down on the internet and in the reality. Like I say, I'm not sure why it happens at a particular time, but I know it happened to me. Can you see the lights in my eyes? Are they coming out? Because they won't come out most of the time, but if I look in the mirror I can see the peculiar shaped lights that are in both eyes, and I noticed this immediately when I became conscious of being negatively patrolled and watched in a manner that is so suppressive, because basically you can't look anywhere or actually hear anything hardly that isn't very disturbing, very aggressive and very unpleasant. All the sounds that come from the traffic, from the vehicles, from work being done, is all deliberately made to be really loud, really aggressive, very mentally disturbing. And of course that's the idea. They want to suppress you and make you look not human, while the what we call androids, but basically they're not human. So what other word do you use? They're psychopathically machine beings. So they're artificial intelligence in a real human body. And even some may not even be in a real human body. By that I mean it may look real, but it may not be. Many would be totally artificially intelligent, completely mind-controlled beings. Mind you, we're all mind-controlled in the reality. Can you see the lights? I don't think it's coming out, but see there and there are these lights, and they're, unfortunately, to actually show them on a video, or for me to show them, I can see them very clearly when I look in a mirror. In fact, I remember it was like well over 6 years ago now when I first noticed them. I can't remember the exact time, probably more than that. I'm guessing it was when I first made a first video, and I remember actually just filming the reflected lights, because these lights actually sometimes can reflect back off objects. In other words, I can look at objects and I can actually see these funny shaped lights reflected back on the objects. And I remember actually filming it, recording it in a very short video, just because for some reason I thought, oh, if I show it to someone, I'll show that it's a peculiarity. And basically I did show it, and of course, because most of the time you're talking to an android or someone who just isn't interested and who doesn't want to see the truth, or basically would not be interested anyway, because like if I just show that what is in my eyes gets reflected off objects, because it's the same shape, the same thing, that all I was trying to show to someone was that it's strange that wherever I look, this same objects that are in my eyes are reflected off objects, but not every object, only if it's like an object that can somehow reflect the light. I'm guessing, but either way, it's not relevant. I'm wasting time here. But certainly this particular person here on the screen, this one here, which would probably be one of the few, the very few that are on the internet that not speak truth, but that are a genuine human being. Most will speak the truth on the internet, but they will not be a real human being. Because if you are a real human being, you will be not just, say, stalked and patrolled by what we call narcissistic types of personality disordered people. No, you will be, it will be a whole system, it will be the whole city. And many will, of course, claim this is happening to them too. But in reality, it will only happen to a very few people. This is part of the end game camouflage, I think, of some sort. It's part of the deception. The main deception is to have the androids pretend to be the real human beings, while the real human beings are made to not exist. Not just not exist, but they really are making your life a living hell, because they won't let you live, they won't let you do basic things, they won't leave you alone for a second even. In fact, it is totally because of the things in the eyes and because of the reality that the internet and the computer system. I don't know how they do it, but it's totally connected to the few human beings' real mind. So basically they're reading your thoughts, they're imitating everything about you because they're watching, patrolling and observing you in minute detail. They want to copy the real humanity, because most that are imitations of life understand humanity, and they're living in amongst it, and they're pretending to be that, but they don't naturally think or live that way. So that's why I think they stalk and patrol the real humans. One, to suppress them, so that you're limited and can't do even the most mundane normal things, or at least you can't do it apart from being under this, it's like you can't do it fully functioning, you can't do it naturally or normally. You're always conscious of their presence. They're always in your line of sight. And this is because they can see your every movement, because the lights that are in my eyes are part of their ability to see and experience everything that I see and experience right this very moment and every second of the day. It gives them the advantage to know how you're experiencing life as a human, so therefore they can imitate that. They take that as their knowledge. In fact, they're basically taking on the remaining humans' whole sense of being, everything that's about you. And they seem to prefer picking the most, I would say, even though I personally never considered myself to be very human or very emotional or very loving even. But that's only my own perception. That's not their perception. Even though I have been basically kept from normal relationships and normal interactions, and even consciously been antisocial myself because of fears and experience, etc. This is normal for a human being because you're in this matrix surrounded by android beings that are not really human, not in the sense that you think of a human being. They do not experience any form of real humanity or any form of high frequency, vibration or energy, shall we say. All those things which I don't understand are alien to them. In fact, for all practical purposes, they are a different life form. They are a different species. It's just that they come in an apparently real human body. Even the human body that they come in is a duality body, but because they will emphasize the male or the female aspect to a large extent, and even that is now being made more apparent that it's more acceptable to have a duality body. But in the past, you would have to emphasize the male or the female, because real human beings come in either a real male or a real female body, and they combine to create life. None of this much takes place now, as I've pointed out. This you just won't fully comprehend, because there will still be the pretense that the duality beings are male and female and combine and make love together. All these things do not happen. They only happen very occasionally with real humans, but the real humans, at least in most cities, you will have a lot more androids and very few real humans. But also the real humans will always be completely surrounded by the androids. One, because they need the human energy, and two, because they need to imitate the real human being, so therefore they have to watch them all the time. And three, because they want to keep control of the reality, or in other words, the city or whatever. So because they're about control, and because they want to be seen as superior, or at least be in control of everything, therefore they are part of the powers that be, they're part of the city, they're part of the countries. It's very hard to explain, but what I'm trying to say is they're not about everyone being independent and free and just randomly doing things. I mean, sure, there's always control because we like to have a little bit of organised control in a city. Probably because we don't realise that we've always been amongst androids, and that we're conditioned since birth, because you're in a society where you are living amongst androids, where there's always that need for control, where there's always the need to be seen, all these things that even real humans are very strongly conditioned to. For the androids, it's 100% only about control, because they're psychopathically steeped in narcissism and of that paranoid controlling nature, because they don't experience normal human emotions. So therefore that is their existence. That's the difference. If they had normal human emotions, they wouldn't just be centred 100% on total power and control. There would be other aspects to their reality, but instead they have to fake that, because basically they use humanity's humanness against them in order to keep the control. So in order to keep power and control, they have to be the best imitation of humanity. They have to pretend to be the most real human being, and in order to do that, they have to be around the remaining real humans and observe them, copy them, and suppress them at the same time, so they can be, gives them the benefit to be seen as the real human, as would make sense if you understand this. It's just that most people don't see it, because if you are not experiencing it, you won't see it, just as I didn't see it until they came out into the open and basically closed in on me. Before that, I didn't see it. I merely was conditioned to suppressing myself naturally, and while you can do that, or while you do that, they have no reason to openly expose themselves and close in on you. In other words, to where you're aware that you're being stalked and patrolled, and to where you're aware that most of the beings around you are psychopathic and are working against you, and that they're a collaborative effort, they're a combined force. They don't just have a few patrollers, a few stalkers, a few authority vehicles watching you. No, they have the entire suburb, because that way you don't have any means of support, but also you cannot you can't do anything about it because you're outnumbered, and if the majority are secretly working against you in a stalking patrol force or a neighbourhood watch, which is out in the open anyway. It's a neighbourhood watch, but it's not a neighbourhood watch that just watches, it's a neighbourhood watch that also suppresses, because they've already decided that you are not one of them. And they already know this because they know that they're different to a real human. Whether they're conscious that they're a totally different species or that they're totally psychopathic is probably not likely. Only the elite demigods or the self-aware psychopathic narcissistic beings would be aware of this. In other words, only the self-aware that are at that level where they're able to function perfectly still as a real human being, whilst being aware that they're not, or that they're psychopathic. This is rarer because it's more difficult to do this, as you can imagine. If you know that you're a total fraud, or have to fake it all the time, that's rather difficult. Whereas if you are programmed and actually believe your own lies, or you believe that you're a human when you're not, and you believe the false memories, you believe the false situations where you think that everything that you think is real. In other words, you're not really, you're not really doing wrong things. If you believe that wrong is right, and the ones that are right are really wrong, you don't have to put on an act because you're believing your own lies. And this is actually true of most psychopathic, narcissistic, controlling beings. And when you've encountered and experienced them in your life, you actually, at some point, realise this. But it might take you 20 years. I mean, unless you're actually aware that most people are not the same as yourself, and you don't understand that the reason they're so the reason that you are always feeling bad, and the reason that you feel limited, and the reason that they appear to be, if you know them well, very cold and not the same as what you think a real human is. In fact, even though you may or may not encounter real humans, you will know that some people closest to you are definitely not how you think, but also not how you would have thought that the average real human is. But you still might not understand why they're like that. It may take a long, long time before you realise that. And even then you will have to look into the psychology of these different so-called personality types. And they're very anti-life personality types. They're not, a psychopath is not human. A psychopath is not human the way you think a human being is human. We know this. Just because something comes in a human body doesn't make it human. But that's the deception. And if the psychopath acts very human, even though it doesn't really think or feel human, and secretly wants to destroy humanity, then that's the reality. But it's also a reality that you won't be able to see. Because if psychopaths act the same as a real human, and probably do it better, and also manage to take the limelight from the real humans because they have their comrades, shall we say, or their allies, or just their fellow psychopaths, all combined in a community program, or just even a stalking system around a real human being. That real human not only doesn't get any limelight, but is actually being made less. In fact, you know, you feel as though you're turning into something that isn't human because you're always angry, you're always patrolled, you're always feeling rejected. Because if you know that everyone is working against you, that's like showing that they actually don't like you at all. In fact, not only that they don't like you, they actually dislike you in a very strong way. So they're the opposite of love. They're certainly not indifferent, because most of the time you expect most human beings to be reasonably indifferent to you if they don't know you. You don't expect every stranger and every civilian on the street to be stalking and patrolling you for no reason when you haven't even met them. And this is why you eventually realise that these beings don't need a reason, because they're psychopathic. They need your human energy. So that's their reason. Their survival in their minds depends on extracting your negative energy, or at least you serving and, admiring them. But obviously, if they're patrolling and stalking you on the streets, they probably realise that they're not going to get your admiration. So therefore they get the stronger negative energy from you by basically intimidating you through excessive watching, excessive patrolling, and to where you don't have a moment hardly on your own to where you can't be aware or see or hear their presence. They basically take over your whole reality because they take over your sight and sound. If I cannot look anywhere without seeing a patroller, if I cannot hear anything pleasant apart from negative noises, even right this very moment, the sun is just barely starting to come up. And of course we have, it's raining. Can you hear the car pulling out there, making the noise as it goes out? Most of the time it's much more loud than that, the noise they make. It just happens, they always... plane going over at the same time. Oh dear. Oh, it's raining, so don't know if I'm filming this properly because I had to turn it round. I had to turn it round. It's just I had to turn it round because I've got, when I'm filming myself, which most of the time I just film it like that, it's actually raining out there. The sun's just come up, plane started, the patrollers pull out their cars, but as I go, if I go down the road, and of course even the rain is controlled by the powers that be. Now, there's two ways of looking at how they control the weather. Human thought creates reality, so they control your mood so that they can always keep whatever weather conditions. But also, we know that the powers that be have the science to manipulate the reality. They can make rain, they can change the weather conditions. The technology and the science behind manipulating the atmosphere and stuff is openly exposed anyway. It's just that we don't think that they do it to the extent that they do. But why wouldn't they? Why wouldn't they? You know, like, why wouldn't they? The powers that be, those that control the reality, why wouldn't they? You know, why wouldn't they, you know, control the weather and conditions if it means that they keep their power and control over the reality? Because this whole reality is about mind control. It is about controlling human beings' reality, and the way they control the reality isn't just by physically controlling the reality, but how they want you to think about the reality. So they don't want me to consciously think that they control the weather or the climate or the earth in any way. They want me to think that, well, they want me to think whatever they want me to think. And unless you become aware that you are being totally controlled and totally mind controlled, in my case I'm aware that I'm totally physically being controlled, but also mind controlled, because although they don't actually touch me, if you are continuously stalked, if you are continuously watched, if you are always getting negative reality being pushed in your face, if you can't have, if every sound and every sight is of their choice, to where all I see is their patrollers and all I hear is their noisy constructions, all staged and set up to take over my senses, so that I'm always at low frequency and vibration. So that means I'm always giving out a negative energy, which is what the androids feed off. That gives them life. They can run around and do, and also pretend to be more happily human. So they can pretend to be more high vibrational and more high frequency, more happy than what they really are, because they don't experience, or they are not capable of happy vibrations. Just as we're told that from a psychological standpoint, psychopaths and narcissistic personality disordered humans, which we're told make up a minority of the population, whereas in reality, in most cities, they make up most of the population, because they surround real humans out of a necessity, because they're survival machines and they need the human energy. So as you can imagine, they're not going to be they're not going to put themselves in areas where they can't get that energy. So over time they always infiltrate the areas where humans are, which is what I've observed in the suburb of Leichhardt, in the inner west section of the city of Sydney, which is in the country of Australia, by the way. Just thought I'd mention that, even though my videos don't go out to anyone or anything at this point, and probably never will. And if they hit one or two people, that would be like a miracle. But essentially the whole purpose of making videos is that you have to get to, not the majority, but you do have to get to the majority of human beings. It's pointless making videos for the androids, even though originally that would have been my intention, because you think that you can change someone's mind or get them to stop patrolling and stop with their surveillance and stop with being part of this negative campaign against particular people. But either way, that is not possible because, you know, you don't understand at the time that they're not all human beings. You know, I mean, if you understand that they just don't think the same way as what a human being does and don't even experience life that way, because if they're not able to experience happiness the way that the things that would make a normal human being happy don't make them happy. They don't experience any form of association with life or love in any way. So therefore they don't relate to life. They merely mingle with life and relate to it in order to emulate it and exploit it. They interact with human beings to get the energy from them and to emulate and copy them so that therefore they can take advantage of a human being's humanity. Because the only way that they can interact and get the energy from a human is by pretending to be a real human. Otherwise, real human beings would run a mile, wouldn't they? Because they would know that it's not in their interest. Of course, if you have a whole community around you, a whole suburb and a whole section of the city that basically surrounds you every day, you actually can't run from them. If it was a personal interaction, you do probably have some choice, and even that will depend on your circumstances. You know, you may not be able to run from relatives or from relationships where you have committed yourself to them. And this is often the reality, unfortunately, too. But it becomes almost impossible when you have people just around you that should just be living their own lives and getting about their own business, actually being employed by the powers that be to do nothing but to watch and patrol you, and that it is part of their daily functions, shall we say. It certainly appears to be. And many of them actually don't even have any other existence from what I can see. Some may and some may not, but most of what's around me appears to be totally part of this controlling game that is played to extract my energy. Probably because there's not enough humans to provide them with energy, and maybe because their numbers are vast and the human numbers are smaller in the area where I am, naturally I suppose then also it will only be the elite demigods or the more best imitations of human beings, in other words, more successful human beings, that will be able to form the most personal interactions with real humans to get the energy out of them. So if you are, if you are like, say, a human being, even like myself, where you don't have any particular skills, you don't have a particular occupation, you don't have a particular lifestyle, and you don't have a lot of means. You may not have a lot of money or a lot of social support. So therefore, if you are in certain circumstances and you are even a limited android, then it becomes necessary to be employed by the powers that be in a total surveillance system around a human being, because you don't have any way of interacting with that person at a personal level. And also there would be too many of you. Like, I can't interact personally with 100,000 people, can I? And if I know that they're all psychopathically inclined and a totally different species that actually doesn't even not only get on with you, but actually has an aversion to you, even though they will pretend, of course, to get on with you and pretend to be friendly. But that's just the cover, because, naturally, if you are stalking someone that you have no reason to watch, and that person, you don't know them, and you probably realise that even the reasons why you were told to stalk is not true. I mean, why do people stalk me when I just go down to the shops and get a drink or something? Like, why is that regarded to where the police sirens and, it's almost like high alert the minute you go outside your door, when they know most of the time that you're not going anywhere and you're not even doing anything particularly interesting. But they have to keep your frequency and vibration low, because they're aware that everything is frequency, vibration and energy. They have to keep you always sad and depressed and always on edge, always agitated. And they do this through invading my senses, by making negative noise, by continually stalking and patrolling me, by not allowing me any life of my own, or any reality of my own, really, because if they're always in your vision, if they're always being heard, then that becomes your reality, because that is your reality. What I see and hear is what is real around me. I can talk all this spiritual stuff, and you can talk religion, and you can say all these things, but what you actually deal with in your life, how you encounter people and what's around you, is your reality. Yes, of course, you do have to try to block it out, but that really means you're blocking out your reality. You're not living. And that's your only hope of survival, or of keeping your own sanity, and also, basically, yes, just keeping your own sanity and surviving. And that is not always possible. And in the meantime, of course, they're pretending to be you. They're pretending to be a real imitation of life. They're pretending to be a real human. So they're also probably, if they are a good imitation of life, like the demigods, which is what you see on the internet and on your world stage in all the different artistic, creative and leadership type of power stage performers in any way, they're the ones that have all the influence and all the power and all the control. Whether that just be through admiration or, acceptance even of that power and control. But whichever way you look at it, they're the ones that will interact personally with the real humans, usually, because whoever presents the best imitation of life or pretends to be the best human will get the support and admiration and trust of the remaining real humans. And while the real humans will be surrounded by their negative patrollers, their negative watchmen, their army, Lucifer's army, Lucifer's legions of this matrix, because essentially the whole earth is really a matrix one way or the other. It's just that some people are more aware of that than others, because some will be openly controlled, whereas others will be secretly controlled, and therefore, like myself, before I was openly controlled, I wasn't aware that there was a matrix or a control patrol system completely around me 24/7. I wasn't aware of that until that time. And also I became only aware of it, or at least they decided to openly expose themselves to me, only when I became aware that many people around me were not human, or not human in the way that I would have expected just random strangers, civilians on the street, to be human. I became aware that many people were hidden psychopaths, in other words, or that they had that psychopathy of a very anti-life human, and that I had to try to be more careful in my personal interactions. And the minute I became conscious of this, that's when they then openly showed that these psychopaths were not small in number, but they made up most of the numbers in the inner west section of the city of Sydney, which is many 100,000 people. And this also takes place, no doubt, over the whole city, because it just depends on how many real humans they will, openly surround at this time. I would think that all real humans will be secretively watched. In other words, they will be surrounded and they will be watched, but they will not be aware of it. Whereas when you become aware of their nature and their true essence of what they really are, and you realise that they're not fully human in any way, then, of course, they will show you their numbers, and they will openly, for you personally, show their true nature and their true intentions towards you and what they really think about you. But this will only be apparent to you, because if a patrolling, stalking program is only waged against you in your presence whenever you're on the street and wherever you go, but not to every other human, you are essentially still isolated, and their army is a hidden army. Even though it's there in plain sight for me to see, other people won't see it, because unless you are walking with me 24 hours a day, you won't see it, because the patrollers only patrol around myself. So if I'm on one street, the patrollers are only on my street. They're not on any other street. They're not anywhere else. So no one else sees them. So unless I had a real human companion with me 24/7 to show this secret patrol force around me, basically it remains invisible. And that's the whole idea of it. And in the meantime, the more the best actors out of these false humans then interact with the real humans and get involved with them, have personal relationships with them, seduce them, make them believe they're the real humans. And at the world stage level, you have your demigods. That means, your elite music artists, your elite movie actors, They're all movie actors. It's just that they act on the world stage in different fields. You know, they will pretend to be different types of humans with different expertise and different, you know, they will be your gods of the Matrix. In other words, those that you trust and believe in. You don't realise sometimes that when you're watching a demigod or when you're listening to a demigod, that you are actually making that person a god of earth. You don't realise that you are making them subconsciously a god of earth. If you believe or trust in anyone that is basically not telling you what they really are, even if they're helpful in telling you the truth. I mean, you can go to a psychologist and that psychologist will probably be a psychopath. But if you go to that psychologist and they listen to you and they sympathise with you and they offer understanding and they've studied the human psychology so they know how to interact with you, basically you're not going to see that psychopath as a danger to you or even as false, even though you think you're talking to an understanding human being, but you're not. You're talking to a great actor that is pretending to be a real human being, a real psychologist, a real understanding person. That's just an example. If you get information from your elite demigod people, and that information appears to be a benefit to you, and it appears to be the truth, and it will be the truth, and therefore it should benefit you. The only deception is that you're still buying into a lie because that truth is not being told to you by one of your own kind, and it is part of deception. It is part of what they call the end-time, endgame deception, because as human beings become aware of some of the reality, then you will have to be drawn to the demigods of the internet, or the demigods of the computer system, or the demigods of the world stage for for information, and you will think that you will be getting the truth from them. And you will be getting the truth from them, but they will be the same, as I say. They are artificial intelligence. They are essentially the equivalent of a psychopath in a human body, but they are the greatest actors, just as your greatest actors are all really psychopaths. But when you watch them on the screen, you believe every word they say. You relate to them. You believe in their human emotions, even though they merely project out those human emotions. When you're watching two actors, in a film, you believe everything they're saying and doing while you're watching them, even though you know they're acting. So if you didn't know they were acting, how much, they can't convince you any more than when you're watching the movie. So if those same actors or those around you that are also acting are putting on a performance for you, how much more should you believe them, even though, like I say, when you're watching actors that you know are acting, while you're watching them, they convince you that it's real. That's just an example of it, but it's basically where if you're a human being, you'll really be surrounded mainly by actors. And if you do encounter a real human being, you won't be able to tell the difference between the actors and the real human being, because the actors will act out being a real human being. And they will always try to isolate you from the real human beings, because although you can't tell the difference, they know the difference, they know what they are, and they know they're about control and about segregating human beings from other human beings. Because they want the energy from a human being. They need it. They don't want you to be giving positive energy to another human being. They want you to be giving all your energy to what isn't a human being, all under the pretense that you think it is a human being. For all practical purposes, it may look like one, it may talk like one, it may even act like one, but it isn't human in itself, because it doesn't feel those human emotions that it pretends to put out there. And it may convince itself, just as many actors employ the method style of acting, we're told. That means to where while they're playing the part, they believe the part. While they're playing the part, they are the part, they become the part. And this is also like the less self-aware, psychopathic, narcissistic, paranoid types of artificial beings. They actually do believe their performance. This is what makes them completely indistinguishable from real life, because a human being knows they're human. In fact, they probably think that it's just everyone. And the androids also believe their own performances. They believe their own program, shall we say. I'm guessing. I don't know this 100%, but I have been informed by the distinctions between different malignant, narcissistic types of personality disordered so-called human beings, that most are not self-aware that they're basically an imitation human being. Most believe that they're a human being, but they probably, I think the reason that they get disturbed when they're around real human beings, and where they become aggressive and try to control them even more, is because they probably sense that maybe the person they're dealing with isn't just a good actor like they are, that maybe they really are human, that maybe when they're showing human traits, instead of them assuming that, because I'm told that they assume that everyone is a liar and everyone's an actor like them. We know this, don't they? Most people project out, even human beings assume that most human beings are a bit similar to themselves, which is how we get fooled into not realising the psychopathic nature or the artificial intelligence that's around us. Why would you suspect that when you just assume that everyone is kind of similar to yourself? You assume that everything's human, and that therefore most human beings have certain wants and needs, and in general, provided you're not too traumatised, you're not going to be, a total psychopath, shall we say. That's just an assumption, and that's also where human beings fall into deception, because the same way that, I'm told that psychopaths think that everyone else is a deceiver and a liar and a fraud, basically, that everyone's acting. human beings also are under the deception that they think that most human beings are human, or at least, and therefore do tend to, not be unreasonable, stalking psychopaths. In other words, to where they can form relationships with people where there isn't a relationship. They can get fixated and obsessed over human beings for insane ideas, shall we say, or insane reasons. In other words, like if you consider, like when you see your own reality where you see total community watch being employed around you on a massive scale. Of course, if you understand that this is also connected to the community, to the council, to the government, to the powers that be, to all the different departments, and if you understand that the army, the military, they're all about mind control, they're all about keeping the reality the way they want. Like this is just what you see worldwide too, even though I don't keep up on world affairs much, because I see it as all as staged anyway. But even if it wasn't, you know that you can't do anything about something that's not in your own vicinity. And why would you, if you can't change your own city, what is the point in thinking you can change a city on the other side of the world, or a place on the other side of the world? And in fact, I think it's when you become aware that your own city is totally mind controlled and just a total military base, really, or in other words, a total army base, but that everyone is part of that army, and that army is really against human beings. Then you have to put it on a religious or a spiritual level and have to say what makes a particular human being surrounded by huge numbers of what appear to be non-human life. Why are they patrolling and trying to suppress you, whilst at the same time pretending to be a better imitation of you? I know in the area where I am, every single idea, every single thought I get gets put into place by the council around me. Every single thing that's fixed up, I don't even have to say anything. I only have to think it or show it by a simple action. And of course, I'm not trying to make the community or the area around me do that. I just do my own personal thing, but because they're watching human beings to understand how to do anything positive, because that's something that you must understand, is that these imitation beings, these artificially intelligent human beings, these psychopathic, narcissistic, paranoid, controlling beings, do not do anything positive naturally themselves. That's why they have to stalk and patrol the real humans. Otherwise they'd be exposed for being anti-life, anti-human, and psychopathic in nature. If human beings realise that most of what is around them is essentially psychopathic, and if they could, if they realise that, it would be mind-altering, wouldn't it? I mean, it would. They would naturally then be seeking their own kind, and they would be wanting to. They would realise that they would have to push the psychopaths away or stop them in their tracks somehow, because they know that if they don't, they will take them over, which is essentially what happens, because it's not like artificial intelligent, paranoid, psychopathic type human beings will leave you alone. They don't seem to want to coexist with you in any sort of compatible way. They don't, because they're only about control. They're only about controlling human beings, because psychopaths don't experience any other sort of life. So how could they? Their only focus is on controlling human beings. That is their reality. That's their very nature. That's the only thing that seems to make them tick, shall we say. If they had other, if they had any sort of connection with kind of human things or with life, apart from pretending to be life, because that elicits support, attention and admiration, so therefore they're worshipped. So, they're essentially about worship and control, I guess. And that's like Lucifer, the god of earth, and its minions. That's essentially, you could say that's their two priorities, but they don't really have anything else. Everything else is an imitation to get those things. To be worshipped and to have control. If they can't get control by being worshipped and served, then they, just go out for total control through force, you could say, through direct force. When I say direct force, it will be direct force, but if you are an innocent human being, then it will be direct, covert, secret force. Because if you're being stalked by a whole community, a whole city almost, you're not, that is force, but it's secret force, it's hidden force. It's not, because they can't show their true colours, because then they expose themselves to be an imitation form of life. They, instead of being the good guy, because they want to be the imitation good guy, then they would be exposing themselves to be imitation bad guy. Well, they don't want to be seen as an imitation anyway, do they? They want to be seen as the real good guy, as opposed to the reality that they're really an imitation bad guy. They're an imitation bad human being, guy or girl. And they're not a guy or a girl either, because they're always a duality being. So they're always guy, girl, androgyne, androgynous, imitation human being. That's also the physicality, but that will not be apparent either, because everything will look relatively normal, everything will look relatively natural. And also, human beings are now conditioned to, like even myself, to actually relate to the androgynous image. In other words, the guy-girl image, the man and woman in one, which is essentially the god of earth. Lucifer is your elite demigod, androgyne, android being. And this was, probably one of original creation, shall we say. But anything that is too artificial often does seem to turn on humankind, for instance, and I don't know, it does seems to happen that way. And I can't explain why that happens, but either way, my body is going on me here. I am actually being under direct energy attack here, even as I sit and speak, so I think I better close off the video before I lose total mobility here. And because, although everything is invisible, just as these beings make their true nature invisible, the implication or the employment of the knowledge of using energy and frequency and vibration against human beings is always in force. Whether they're conscious of it or not doesn't matter. many people that, say, are part of an army don't always understand the technology or the reasons behind the orders they're given, but they still carry out those orders, and it's pretty much, so it doesn't really matter if you're the blunt of that energy, if you're the, if you are seen as the enemy by the army, then, you know, as a human being, you might try to analyse or wonder why apparent real citizens on the street want to stalk and patrol you, and why they are aggressive in their use of sound and vibration against you. But, you know, you have to, you know, that's probably a waste of my energy or yours to even do that, even though you can't help but do it. In fact, that also gives them energy because you're focusing on them, you're giving your attention to them. It's impossible to ignore sight and sound, whether it be, you know, anyone or anything around you. It's impossible to ignore people that come into that take over your senses, people that come into your sight, particularly when you're aware, and they want you to be aware that they are patrolling you. You know, in the past you could have 1,000 people around you, but if you think they are there for another reason apart from stalking and suppressing you, you're not going to be overly bothered by them. It's the same if you occasionally experience unpleasant mechanical noise or loud sounds that are disturbing. If you think that it's not intentionally, it doesn't anger you or make you feel agitated quite as much. It still could if it was very loud. I mean, no one enjoys jackhammers and excessively loud, even excessively loud music can be hard on the hearing. It becomes a negative vibration. But if it's deliberately employed and you know the intention is anti-you, dislike of you, that then you become very mentally disturbed by that. And I'm not saying that, you know, those that are more religious and spiritually inclined understand that it's a spiritual war. And the spiritual war is essentially one God against another and one species against another, or one type of human being against another. And they're actually opposing forces. A psychopath always opposes a real human being, even though they don't always openly show that. But they will always be opposed to a real human being, just in the nature of their being, because they don't, because you can't relate to them, and they essentially, well, you could relate to them if they are an imitation human being, and if they pretend to be on your wavelength. They study you, they copy you, they pretend to understand you, then you can relate to them, but they can never relate to you because they don't experience human emotions. Psychopaths are very cold beings. They're cold to humanity, they're cold to any form of life, we're told this. And this is essentially the same as artificial intelligence, and most of the humans that engage in patrolling control systems around a human being. I'm not saying that they can't occasionally coerce and convince a human being to be part of a negative stalking patrol system. In other words, if a psychopath tells a real human being that another real human being, in other words, a psychopath tells a real human being, a normal human being, that another human being is, say, a psychopath or has done some very negative things, they could coerce that human being into being part of a stalking patrol system on the basis of total deception and lies. Because if that normal, real human being doesn't check that out and believes the psychopath and has no reason to suspect that another human being would make up dreadful lies about a human being, not realizing that that's exactly what psychopaths and narcissistic that are malignant with that what they call totally dominant personality that has to be worshipped and has to have all the attention for themselves. They have to be the god. And because they secretly know that the real human being is closer to real God, whereas they are really serving artificial intelligence, they're serving their God, which is artificial technical being, whether they know it or not, but they know that they're meant to be playing in a normal natural earth. And they know that their focus of playing in that normal natural earth is to focus on a relatively normal natural human being. There are very few real normal natural human beings even, because we've been programmed by our surroundings too, just as the androids are programmed by their own deception and by their own need to pretend to be an imitation of life in order to keep control and in order to survive. I mean, they're not called survival machine beings for nothing, because that's essentially what they basically are in essence. And that's normal for a human being too. Everyone has a natural, normal instinct to try to survive. And, you know, it's a lot easier to survive if you are a psychopath or a cold human being, because you're never going to let your human emotions be used against you. But of course, I suppose you could say that that doesn't mean that, as we're told, that even narcissistic people can be deceived because of their excessive narcissism too. That can happen too. You know, especially when you focus on the real human beings and you're only interested in bringing them down, you won't notice that your own kind also is about being superior, and they have that, you know, they're also, you know, because you know, you can't have, you know, we have two gods, okay? So we have the God of earth and we have the God of creation, if you want to put it simply. So we have a technical God and we have a natural creator God. But the technical God creates through natural creation by controlling the human mind or controlling creative mind, because it has to pretend to be human. Artificial intelligence can create, but it creates technically, but it can't keep control of this fake natural earth unless it understands what it is to be a human being, because in order to survive it has to copy being a real human being. And so it has to create by understanding the human mind, because it only creates for survival. It doesn't create necessarily in a human way. Human beings don't create just for survival, I wouldn't think. But it has to pretend to create creatively in order to survive. So artificial intelligence has to do creative, productive things that are human in order to survive in this human Earth, or what is believed to be a total human Earth, even though the numbers now, of course, have reversed around to where it's not a total human Earth. It's largely controlled by technology, which is artificial intelligence. And if you realise that also most or a lot of beings are also artificial intelligence, or the equivalent of psychopaths pretending to be humans, then that's the reality. And I think and I think I've rambled on, and the planes are coming over the roof, so perhaps it's time for me to be on my way and finish. I was going to show what I thought was my hand has gone numb, my leg has gone numb, and I'm pretty much numb because I'm not allowed to be a normal, natural human being in this reality. You're always surrounded by artificial intelligence. You're surrounded by their programs around you. That means everything that goes on around me is all staged and set up. All the people are the same as actors reading a script, but it's all a script designed to keep you in low frequency and low vibration, or unhappy. Always on edge, never feeling relaxed and like a normal, natural human being. They want the roles reversed around to where they pretend to be the normal, natural human being, and you feel angry and in survival mode. So you become an angry machine being, which is what they are, while they pretend to be an imitation, real, apparently lovable human being, or at least trying to be. And really, in this earth, there's no real gods, in the sense that because it is a duality earth, and because it operates in that light, dark, right, wrong, always, it's never like stable to where one force predominates. And because you've got false human beings and the rest mind-controlled human beings like myself, which means that, you're also negative because you're mind-controlled by the environment around you. But it's not accidental. It's all set up and staged to keep you that way, to always be directing you towards limitation and negative thinking. No human being feels connected to their Creator God. Most human beings are not only don't feel that, but they're connected to artificial intelligence. They're connected to screens, to computers, and to android beings around them. So even if you turn your screen off, turn your computer off, which means you probably wouldn't be able to survive anyway, you will still be surrounded by android beings. So, figure that out for yourself. You're always going to be mind controlled. You're always going to be mind controlled. You're always going to have, something technical or artificial around you, or something that's not human. It's just that you won't be conscious of that. That's the only difference, and of course it's the problem. But whether you're aware of this or not, it will still be a problem. In fact, if you're aware of it, it will probably be a major problem. It will destroy your life. It will destroy your sense of what you are and the world, and it will destroy your belief in humanity, because you will realize that most isn't, and also you will be aware that you will be, that you're separate from humanity, and that there's not a lot of humanity, and that, you'll realize that, realize that you're very alone, but not alone to where like some people are fine being alone even. Androids are not fine being alone because they need the human energy, and they need to assimilate with human beings in order to pretend to be the best imitation human being. But some human beings can become hermits almost, but but to realize that you, even if you keep to yourself, that you're essentially in an alien android psychopathic reality, and that most people around you are not normal, natural human beings, and that even if you are not focused or interested in them, if you say, oh, well, look, I can coexist with artificial intelligence because I'm not against it, but that doesn't mean that it won't be against you, because, see, it has a different agenda. Because it's not human, it has needs that you don't have. Well, actually, even human beings do usually. A normal human being does usually have a normal need to want to interact with other humans. But certainly some human beings can still keep their humanity even when they're on their own. And of course, in light of the reality now, you'll be forced to be on your own, because the only people you'll be allowed to interact with will be of the artificial variety. You will be interacting with, beings that secretly are working against you. In fact, you know that even when you talk to them, that it's a performance. And if you're a human being, that also becomes another negative thing in your life, because it can be tiresome and distressing to realise that you have to pretend to be friendly and like other beings that don't feel that way about you at all, and that they're, they are fair weather friends. They're as they openly will say, they're basically total Decepticons. They're con you, they're deceiving, they're pretending to like you when they actually don't, and they will pretend to help you while they're really always working against you. That kind of hypocrisy also is offensive and disturbing to have to live with daily, because, like I say, it's not like you're understanding something but saying, oh, well, look, if you leave them alone, they leave you alone. You kind of think that even a psychopath has to have a motive to stalk and patrol you and cause you some sort of distress. You don't think that psychopaths or that narcissistic people can become obsessed with you when they don't know you, when you don't intend anything negative for them. But that's because you don't understand. Until you understand the psychology of these beings, and until you interact with them and see that what you think would be a normal reality with people is not so. That yes, these people can stalk you for years and be obsessed with you without really knowing you at all. Some of them don't even speak to you. Most of the people that stalk and patrol you, in their thousands and thousands, don't even speak to you. They have never interacted with you. But because they're following you all the time, watching your every move, they have formed an obsessive, unhealthy